Everyone said the Reynolds family had everything: power, money, and influence. But behind the tall glass walls of their mansion sat a quiet room where silence spoke louder than words. Inside that room was Sophia, the only daughter of Richard Reynolds, a man who ran one of the biggest corporations in the city. Sophia hadn't always lived like this, quiet, lonely, and forgotten. Before the accident, she was the kind of girl who filled every space with laughter. Her smile was the kind people noticed, the kind that made others feel lighter just by being around her. She used to spend her weekends hiking with friends, attending her father's company events and volunteering at local schools. People admired her not because she was the boss's daughter, but because she was warm, humble, and kind. But everything changed one rainy evening 2 years ago. She had been on her way home from a charity event, sitting in the back seat of her father's car. The rain poured so heavily that even the streetlights looked blurred. Then came the sound, and that one horrible sound of tires screeching and metal twisting. When she woke up in the hospital, her father was sitting beside her, eyes red and face pale. The doctor's words echoed like thunder. She may not walk again. Since that day, Sophia's world became smaller. At first, everyone came to visit: family, friends, business partners, even people she barely knew. They brought flowers, cards, and sympathy, but over time the visits stopped. The calls became less frequent. People moved on with their lives, and Sophia was left watching from behind her window as the seasons changed. Her father, Richard, tried to act strong. He told her he was proud of how brave she was, but deep down he blamed himself. He buried his guilt under endless meetings and business trips. He told himself that working harder would somehow make things better. But in truth, he was running away from the silence, from the sadness, and from his daughter's eyes that reminded him of everything he couldn't fix. Every morning, Sophia would wake up to the sound of the caretaker drawing the curtains. The sunlight spilled into her room, but she barely noticed. Her wheelchair sat near the window, facing the garden her mother used to take care of before she passed away. The flowers still bloomed thanks to the gardener, but they didn't look as bright anymore. Sometimes she'd see her father's car leaving the driveway, and she'd raise her hand to wave, though she knew he wouldn't see her. He was always in a rush, always late for something important. The days were quiet, too quiet. Her friends from before the accident had slowly drifted away. They sent occasional messages, "Hope you're doing well," or "Miss you," but no one actually came by. It wasn't that they didn't care. They just didn't know what to say anymore. When someone's life changes so suddenly, people don't always know how to handle it. So Sophia learned to handle it alone. She read books. She painted sometimes, though her hands weren't as steady as before. She watched documentaries about places she might never visit, and sometimes late at night, she'd scroll through old photos, smiling faces, hiking trips, beach parties, and wonder if that girl in the pictures was really her. Her father's company often hosted big charity galas, the kind filled with famous faces and expensive gowns. Before the accident, Sophia was always by his side at those events. Now she rarely attended. When she did, people's eyes followed her wherever she went, not with admiration, but with pity. She could feel it in the way they spoke to her, using soft tones as if she might break. They'd say things like, "You're so brave," "Dear," or "It's good to see you out again." But their smiles were the kind that came from guilt, not genuine warmth. One evening, her father came home earlier than usual. That alone was surprising. He stood at her doorway holding a small silver invitation card. "There's a charity event this Saturday," he said. "It would mean a lot if you came." Sophia hesitated. "Another event? You know how people look at me, Dad." "They look because they care," he replied quickly, avoiding her gaze. She gave a weak smile. "No, Dad. They look because they don't know how to." He sighed and rubbed his forehead. "Sophia, please. Just this one night. It's for the company's children's fund. Everyone expects to see us there." She looked at him for a moment. His suit was perfect, his tie neatly knotted, his expression tired but controlled. He looked like a man who had everything. Yet she knew he was breaking inside too. "Okay," she said softly. "I'll go." He nodded, almost relieved. "Thank you, sweetheart." Then he walked away, already answering a call before he even left her room. When Saturday came, the mansion buzzed with activity. Maids and event planners moved through the halls setting up lights and decorations. The smell of fresh flowers filled the air. Sophia's caretaker helped her get ready. She wore a long navy blue gown that flowed around her wheelchair, simple but elegant. She looked at herself in the mirror. Her reflection felt strange. The same face, the same eyes, but the spark that once lived in them seemed dimmer. When she arrived at the event hall, flashes from cameras greeted her. People smiled politely. Some came to say hello, others pretended not to notice. Her father was surrounded by executives shaking hands, making jokes, and raising glasses. Sophia sat near the corner of the room, pretending to enjoy her drink. She watched the crowd, laughter, dancing, music. Everyone seemed so alive. A few guests came over to speak with her, but most conversations were short. After a few minutes, they'd find an excuse to leave. She didn't blame them. It wasn't their fault that her presence made them uncomfortable, but it still hurt. She watched as a group of her father's colleagues talked nearby, their laughter echoing through the room. She caught bits of their conversation, deals, investments, new projects. Not once did anyone include her. She used to be part of those discussions before the accident. She used to have ideas, opinions, and plans for her own life. Now she was just the executive's daughter in the wheelchair. A waiter accidentally bumped into her chair, spilling a few drops of wine onto her dress. He panicked, apologizing quickly. "It's okay," she said gently. "No harm done." He nodded, embarrassed, and rushed off. Moments like that had become common. People didn't mean to ignore her, but they did. After an hour, Sophia's father took the stage to give a speech. Cameras flashed as he thanked donors and shared numbers and goals. His voice was confident, his words smooth. When he mentioned Sophia's name, everyone turned to look at her. She smiled politely and waved, but inside she wished she could disappear. As the applause faded, she noticed her father glancing at her for a brief second. The look in his eyes was complicated. Pride, guilt, love, and pain all mixed together. Then he turned away, back to the crowd that demanded his attention. When the event ended, Sophia asked the driver to take her home early. Her father stayed behind, entertaining guests. Back at the mansion, she rolled herself into the garden. The night air was cool, the scent of roses carried by the wind. She looked up at the sky, the same stars she used to wish upon when she was younger. "I miss her," she whispered, thinking of her mother. You'd know what to say. Tears welled in her eyes, but she brushed them away. She didn't like crying. It made her feel weak even though she wasn't. She had survived something most people couldn't imagine. But surviving didn't mean living. She closed her eyes and listened to the crickets. Somewhere in the distance, she could hear the faint hum of cars on the main road. Life outside kept moving, whether she was part of it or not. That night, she couldn't sleep. She kept thinking about how invisible she felt, how people saw her wheelchair before they saw her face. She wished someone, anyone, would just talk to her like she was a normal person again. Not with pity, not with caution, just normally. Her father returned home past midnight. She heard his footsteps pause outside her door, but he didn't come in. Instead, he sighed, then walked away. Sophia stared at the ceiling, wondering if he ever sat alone and thought about her the way she thought about him. Maybe he did. Maybe they were both just trapped in different kinds of pain. Morning came again, bringing with it the same routine, the same breakfast, the same quiet. The world outside her window looked the same, but inside she felt heavier. She thought about the people who used to surround her, how quickly they had disappeared. She thought about how everyone admired her father, a man of power, always in control, and how no one noticed the lonely girl in the background. Everyone ignored her. Not because they were cruel, but because they didn't know how to see her anymore. They saw the wheelchair, not the woman sitting in it. They saw tragedy, not strength. But Sophia still had hope somewhere deep inside her. A small voice whispered that maybe one day, someone would look at her differently. Not with pity, not with fear, but with genuine kindness. For now, she waited. And as she watched the sunlight stretch across the garden, she couldn't have known that soon. Her quiet world was about to change. Someone unexpected was about to enter her life. Someone who would see her not for what she had lost, but for everything she still was. Daniel Carter lived in a small rented house on the other side of the city, far away from the fancy buildings and quiet neighborhoods where people like the Reynolds family lived. His home wasn't big, but it was warm. The walls were filled with drawings, tiny handprints, and paper stars made by his 8-year-old son, Ethan. Every morning began the same way. Daniel would make breakfast: 2 slices of toast, 1 scrain, MBL'd egg, and a glass of milk for Ethan. He always joked that breakfast was fuel for champions, and Ethan would grin, repeating the words as if they were magic. Daniel had been raising his son alone for almost 5 years. His wife had passed away after a long illness, and though time had softened the pain, it never truly went away. There were days when he still woke up reaching for her beside him, only to find the empty side of the bed. But every time he saw Ethan smile, he reminded himself that he still had a reason to keep going. He worked as a mechanic at a local garage. It was tiring, messy work, but he was good at it. People trusted him because he was honest and fair. He didn't overcharge, and he never lied about repairs. His hands were always covered in grease, but his heart was clean. Life was simple, sometimes hard, but filled with small joys. He and Ethan had their little rituals: Friday movie nights with popcorn, Sunday walks to the park, and bedtime stories that always ended with laughter. They didn't have much, but they had each other, and that was enough. One day after school, Ethan ran out of the classroom clutching a paper envelope. His face was glowing with excitement. "Dad! Dad, look!" he shouted as he waved the envelope in the air. "I got something from school." Daniel knelt down and smiled. "Let's see, champ." Ethan handed him the letter, and Daniel read it slowly. It was an invitation from Reynolds Industries, the company that sponsored a citywide scholarship for children with good grades and community involvement. Ethan had been chosen as one of the scholarship winners. Daniel blinked a few times, barely believing it. "You did it, kiddo." Ethan grinned from ear to ear. "Does this mean I'm smart now?" Daniel laughed, pulling him into a hug. "You were always smart, buddy. This just makes it official." The letter mentioned that the winners and their families were invited to a formal charity event at the Grand Willow Hall, hosted by the company's CEO, Richard Reynolds. Dinner, speeches, and awards would be part of the evening. Daniel read that part twice. A fancy event wasn't really his kind of place. He owned exactly 1 suit, and it hadn't been worn since his wedding day. But this was Ethan's achievement, and he wasn't going to take that moment away from him. Over the next few days, Ethan couldn't stop talking about it. "Do you think they'll have balloons or cake, maybe even a band?" Daniel smiled every time. "Maybe all of that. You'll see." Saturday came faster than expected. Daniel spent the morning ironing his old suit. Hoping it didn't look too worn, he helped Ethan get ready in a crisp white shirt and a small bow tie that made him look like a miniature gentleman. When they arrived at the Grand Willow Hall, Daniel's jaw dropped slightly. The building sparkled with light. Cars he couldn't even name lined the driveway. People stepped out wearing expensive clothes, laughing softly as they greeted one another. He felt out of place the moment he stepped inside, but Ethan's excitement kept him grounded. The boy's eyes widened as he took in the chandeliers, the shiny floors, and the music echoing from the stage. "Dad, this is like a movie," Daniel chuckled. "Yeah, a movie where your old man definitely doesn't belong." "Don't say that," Ethan said, tugging his hand. "You look perfect." Daniel smiled and squeezed his son's hand. "Thanks, champ. You look like the star tonight." They found their seats near the back of the hall where families of other scholarship kids sat. The air smelled of perfume and expensive food. Waiters moved gracefully between tables, carrying trays of appetizers Daniel couldn't even pronounce. After a few speeches, people started to mingle. Daniel noticed the CEO, Richard Reynolds, standing near the stage surrounded by business partners. He looked powerful, the kind of man who carried entire rooms with his presence. Daniel couldn't imagine what it was like to live in that world. But then his attention shifted to someone else, a young woman sitting a little apart from the crowd. She was in a wheelchair, wearing a soft blue gown that shimmered under the lights. Her hair was tied neatly, her face calm but distant. People walked past her, offering polite smiles before moving on. For a moment, Daniel didn't know who she was. Then he heard someone whisper nearby, "That's the CEO's daughter. Poor girl. Such a tragedy." He didn't mean to stare, But there was something about her expression, quiet sadness mixed with strength, that caught him off guard. She looked like she wanted to disappear, and yet there was dignity in the way she sat there, holding herself steady. Before he could look away, Ethan tugged his sleeve. "Dad, can I go get some juice?" "Sure, buddy, but be careful, okay?" Ethan nodded and ran off toward the refreshment table. Daniel followed him with his eyes just to be safe. That's when he saw it happen. Ethan, too small to see over the crowd, accidentally bumped into the young woman's wheelchair, spilling his cup of orange juice onto her dress. "Oh no," Daniel muttered, rushing forward. Ethan froze, eyes wide. I'm so sorry, I didn't mean to." The woman looked down at her dress, then back at the frightened little boy. For a second, Daniel thought she might get upset, but instead she smiled softly. "It's okay. It's just juice, don't worry." Ethan's shoulders relaxed and he smiled nervously. "Really?" "Really," she said gently. Daniel arrived just then, already apologizing. "I'm so sorry, ma'am. He didn't see you there. I'll take care of it." "It's fine," she interrupted, her tone kind. "Accidents happen." Daniel noticed that her voice was calm and warm, not the kind you'd expect from someone used to fancy parties. He pulled out a napkin and tried to help, but she stopped him with a small laugh. "It's okay, I've got it." He smiled, still embarrassed. "I'm really sorry. He usually has better aim." She chuckled softly, and for the first time that evening, she seemed relaxed. Ethan stood between them, still looking guilty. "I didn't mean to make you sad." The woman's expression softened. "You didn't. You made me smile, actually. That doesn't happen often." Daniel glanced at her curiously. "You sure about that? Someone like you must have plenty to smile about." Her eyes flickered, a shadow passing through them. "Not as much as you'd think." Daniel realized then that she wasn't just any guest. She was someone used to being watched but not seen. "Still," he said, trying to lighten the mood, "if I can make it up to you somehow, just let me know. Maybe buy you another drink? Water this time, less dangerous." She smiled again. "Deal." Ethan grinned. "Dad, can I stay and talk too?" She nodded. "Of course. I like your company." For the next few minutes they talked, about simple things. Ethan told her about school, his love for soccer, and how he wanted to build cars when he grew up. She listened intently, asking questions, laughing at his stories. Daniel watched quietly, surprised by how easily they connected. Most people around them glanced curiously, whispering, but Daniel didn't care. Neither did she. When Ethan ran off to find another snack, Daniel turned back to her. "You're really good with kids." "I used to volunteer at a children's center," she said softly. Before the accident." He nodded, understanding without needing her to explain further. "Must have been tough." "It still is," she admitted, "but I'm learning to live with it." There was a pause, not awkward but gentle. Two people from different worlds, sitting side by side, sharing a rare kind of honesty. After a while, Daniel smiled. "You know, everyone's so busy here pretending to be important. You're the only one who actually seems real." She laughed quietly. "That's because I stopped trying to impress people a long time ago." "Good choice," he said. "I tried once. Didn't work out." She tilted her head. "What do you mean?" "I showed up to a job interview wearing a borrowed tie and mismatched shoes. Thought they'd care about how hard I worked. Turns out, they only cared about what I looked like." She smiled, a small, knowing smile. "Sounds familiar." He chuckled. "Maybe we're both experts at being ignored." Her laughter faded, replaced by a thoughtful expression. "Maybe. But it feels different talking to you. You're not careful." "Careful?" "Most people are careful around me, like they're afraid to say the wrong thing or look too long. You're not." Daniel shrugged. "I don't see a reason to be. You're just a person. A very brave one, maybe, but still a person." Something in her eyes softened again, as if those simple words meant more than he realized. "Thank you," she said quietly. He nodded. Anytime. When the music started playing, couples filled the dance floor. Daniel noticed her watching them, her gaze far away. He hesitated for a moment, then smiled. "Would you let me be your date tonight?" he asked. She blinked, surprised. "What?" "Just for tonight. No expectations, no pity. Just two people sharing a moment. What do you say?" Her lips parted, then curved into a genuine smile, the kind that reached her eyes. "All right, but I can't dance." "Good," he said. "Neither can I." They both laughed softly. Ethan came back just then, holding another cup of juice. "Dad, are you asking her out?" Daniel chuckled, scratching his neck. "Kinda looks that way, huh?" The young woman giggled, and Ethan grinned. "Cool. She should say yes." "I already did," she said, looking at Daniel. And just like that, something shifted. For the first time in a long while, Sophia didn't feel invisible. The night after the gala, Sophia couldn't stop thinking about what had happened. She lay awake long after everyone had gone to sleep, staring at the faint light coming from her window. For the first time in a long while, she wasn't thinking about what she'd lost. She was thinking about someone new. She replayed that simple question in her mind again and again. "Would you let me be your date tonight?" No one had ever said anything like that to her since the accident. People always looked at her with sympathy or careful words, but Daniel's voice had been calm, steady, and real. He wasn't trying to fix her or make her feel small. He was just there. She remembered the way his son had smiled at her too, how easy it was to talk to both of them. They didn't seem bothered by her wheelchair or the whispers around the room. For a few short minutes she had felt like herself again, not the broken daughter of a rich man, not a symbol of tragedy, just Sophia. The next morning, her father was already out of the house before she woke up. That wasn't new. He always left early for meetings, but this time, his absence felt heavier. Maybe because for once she had something she wanted to tell him. She thought about mentioning Daniel, about how kind he had been, but then she imagined her father's face and decided against it. He wouldn't understand. Sophia spent most of that day near the window, looking at the garden below. Her caretaker, Mrs. Bennett, brought her breakfast as usual. "You were out late last night," the older woman said kindly. "Did you have a good time at the gala?" Sophia smiled faintly. "Better than I expected." "That's good," Mrs. Bennett said, placing the tray on her lap. "You should go out more, dear. It's not good for a young woman to stay indoors all the time." Sophia stirred her tea. "Maybe I just haven't had much reason to." Mrs. Bennett gave her a knowing look. "Maybe now you do." Sophia glanced up sharply, almost spilling her drink. "What do you mean?" The older woman grinned. "Oh, nothing. I just noticed a certain someone was making you smile last night. It's been a while since I've seen that look on your face." Sophia felt her cheeks warm. "He was just being kind." Mrs. Bennett chuckled softly. "Kindness is rare these days. Don't dismiss it so easily." Sophia didn't reply, but her mind stayed on those words long after the woman left. Later that afternoon, she scrolled through her phone, not really expecting anything new. But there it was, a message from an unknown number. "Hi, this is Daniel. I hope you don't mind me getting your number. The event organizer gave it to me so I could thank you properly for being so nice to my son. He can't stop talking about you." Sophia smiled as she read it. She hesitated before replying, then typed, "It was nice meeting both of you. Your son is wonderful." A few minutes later, her phone buzzed again. "He thinks you're a superhero," Daniel wrote. "He's been pretending to push an invisible wheelchair around the living room. I think you've started a trend." Sophia laughed quietly, a real laugh that surprised even her. "That's adorable," she typed back. And just like that, the conversation continued. It wasn't forced or awkward, it just flowed naturally. They talked about simple things: music, movies, food, little everyday moments. He told her stories about Ethan, about his work, and about the silly things that happened at the garage. She shared bits of her day, her paintings, and her favorite books. Before she knew it, the sun had set and the room was dim. She hadn't felt time pass like that in years. Over the next few weeks, they started texting more often. Sometimes they talked late into the night, sometimes only for a few minutes during the day. Daniel's messages always made her smile. He never treated her differently or tried to comfort her like she was fragile. He teased her, made her laugh, and spoke to her as if nothing about her condition mattered. One Saturday morning, he sent her a photo of Ethan holding a handmade card that read, "Thank you, Miss Sophia." It was covered in glitter and crooked hearts. Sophia laughed so hard she nearly dropped her phone. She sent back a picture of her painting, a simple watercolor of a garden, and told him it was for Ethan. Daniel replied, "You just made his whole week. Now he wants to hang it on his bedroom wall." Sophia felt something warm in her chest, something she hadn't felt in a long time. Connection. A few days later, Daniel asked, "Would you like to come visit the garage sometime? Ethan's been talking about showing you his toy car collection. I can make sure the place is quiet and there's a nice coffee shop nearby." Sophia hesitated. She hadn't gone anywhere outside her home and her father's events since the accident. The thought scared her a little. But the way Daniel asked, so casually without pressure, made it easier to say yes. "All right," she wrote back. "But only if there's good coffee." He sent a laughing emoji. "Best in town. Deal." When the day came, Sophia felt both nervous and excited. Mrs. Bennett helped her get ready and drove her there. The garage was smaller than she expected. Old brick walls, metal doors, the faint smell of oil and coffee. But there was something welcoming about it. Daniel was waiting outside, wiping his hands on a rag. He smiled when he saw her. "You made it." "Barely," she joked. "I think your directions included a detour through 3 wrong turns." He laughed. "I'll take the blame for that." Ethan came running out a second later holding a box full of toy cars. "Miss Sophia, look what I brought." She grinned. "Wow, that's quite a collection. Which one's your favorite?" "This one," Ethan said proudly, showing her a tiny blue race car. "Because it's fast and brave like you." Sophia's eyes softened. "That's very sweet, Ethan, thank you." Daniel watched them quietly, something gentle in his expression. He couldn't explain it, but seeing the two of them together filled a space in his heart he didn't know was empty. They spent the afternoon talking and laughing. Daniel made coffee, strong and surprisingly good, while Ethan gave Sophia a tour of the garage. He showed her where his dad worked and how the tools worked. She listened with genuine interest, asking questions and cheering him on. At one point, Daniel caught himself just watching her. The way she smiled, the way she leaned slightly forward when Ethan spoke, the spark that had returned to her eyes. She wasn't the quiet, distant woman from the gala anymore. She was alive, full of warmth. When Mrs. Bennett came to pick her up, Sophia didn't want to leave. "I had a wonderful time," she said sincerely. "Thank you, Daniel." "And you too, Ethan." "You're welcome," Ethan said happily. "Can you come again?" Sophia smiled. "I'd like that," Daniel nodded. "Anytime." That night she couldn't stop smiling. For the first time in 2 years she felt like she had a reason to look forward to tomorrow, but not everyone shared her joy. A few days later, Richard Reynolds returned home early from work. He found Sophia in the garden painting quietly. "I heard you went to a garage last weekend," he said, his tone casual but his eyes sharp. Sophia set down her brush. "Yes, I did." With a mechanic, he added, almost like an accusation. She met his gaze calmly. "With a friend." Richard frowned. "Sophia, people talk. You can't just go spending time with strangers, especially people like that. They don't understand our world." "Our world?" she repeated, her voice tight. "You mean your world, Dad?" He sighed heavily. "You don't know how cruel people can be. They'll twist things, say things that aren't true. I'm just trying to protect you." "Protect me from what?" she said quietly. "From living?" Her words hit him harder than she intended, but she didn't take them back. He didn't reply. He just stood there for a moment, then turned and walked away. That night she cried quietly in her room. She wasn't angry and just tired. Tired of being treated like someone who needed guarding instead of understanding. The next day, Daniel noticed she was quieter than usual over text. "Everything okay?" he asked. She hesitated before replying. "My father found out about our meeting. He's not happy." "I'm sorry," Daniel wrote. "I didn't mean to cause trouble." "You didn't," she replied quickly. "You've been the only good thing lately." There was a pause, then Daniel wrote, "Sophia, listen. I know I don't belong in your world, but I'll never make you feel small in mine." Her heart ached at those words. They met again the following weekend, this time at a small park near her home. Ethan ran ahead chasing pigeons while Sophia and Daniel sat on a bench watching him play. "Do you ever think life gives us second chances?" she asked softly. Daniel looked at her. "I think it gives us moments. It's up to us to turn them into chances." She smiled faintly. "You make it sound easy." "It's not," he said. "But it's worth trying." As the sun began to set, the park bathed in golden light, Sophia realized something. This, sitting in the open air, talking freely, laughing, this was living. And she hadn't truly lived in a long time. When it was time to leave, Daniel walked beside her wheelchair, his hand resting lightly on the back handle. "Thank you," she said softly. "For what?" "For seeing me," he smiled. "Always." As she watched him walk away with Ethan, Sophia felt something deep inside her shift again. Hope. Fragile but alive. She didn't know what the future would bring, but for the first time she wasn't afraid of it. Over the next few weeks, Sophia and Daniel grew closer. It wasn't something planned or rushed. It just happened naturally, like the way sunlight slowly warms a cold morning. They texted almost every day, met when they could, and spoke about everything that felt too heavy to share with anyone else. Sophia had begun to laugh more. Even Mrs. Bennet noticed it. "You've been glowing lately," she said one morning while helping her water the plants. "That friend of yours must be good company." Sophia smiled. "He's different. He doesn't treat me like I'm broken." "That's because you're not," Mrs. Bennet replied gently. It was true. Daniel never made her feel less than who she used to be. With him, she didn't have to pretend. He didn't fill the silence with sympathy or look at her with sadness. Instead, he listened. He joked, and he let her speak freely. It felt real, easy, safe. One afternoon, Daniel invited Sophia and Mrs. Bennet to a small community fair near his neighborhood. It wasn't the kind of event Sophia was used to. There were no photographers, no expensive dresses, just children running around, families laughing, and the smell of popcorn in the air. When she arrived, Daniel and Ethan were already there, helping with a booth that sold homemade lemonade for charity. Ethan waved excitedly when he saw her. "Miss Sophia? Over here." Sophia smiled and waved back. As Daniel walked up, his usual grin spread across his face. "I was starting to think you'd change your mind." "I almost did," she admitted. "But then I thought I could use some lemonade." "Good choice," he said. "Ethan's the best salesman around." For the next few hours, Sophia enjoyed herself more than she expected. She helped Ethan count coins, watched local performers, and even tried her luck at a ring toss game. Daniel teased her when she missed every shot, and she playfully rolled her eyes. At one point, she caught herself thinking how normal it all felt, how good it felt to just be part of something without standing out for the wrong reasons. As the sun began to set, Daniel walked her back to the car. "You know," he said softly, "I think you just broke a record." "For what?" she asked. "For smiling the most times in one day." She laughed. "You keep track of things like that?" "Only when it matters," he said with a grin. Something about the way he said it made her heart flutter, though she tried not to show it. The following week, Sophia's father noticed her happier mood too. He mentioned it one evening at dinner. "You seem better lately," he said, slicing his steak. "I'm glad you're finding ways to keep busy." Sophia hesitated. "I've been spending time with Daniel and his son." His knife stopped mid-cut. "The mechanic?" "Yes," she said carefully. "He's kind, Dad. You'd like him if you gave him a chance." Richard's face tightened. "Sophia, we've talked about this. People from that world don't understand ours." "Our world?" she repeated, frustration rising. "Dad, what world are you talking about? The one where people judge others by their bank accounts?" He sighed, trying to keep calm. "I'm just being realistic. You don't know what people will say if they see you spending time with him. They'll twist it, make it a story. It could damage my reputation and yours." Sophia stared at him, disbelief in her eyes. "Your reputation? Is that all that matters to you?" "Of course not," he said quickly. "I'm trying to protect you." "No, you're protecting yourself," she said quietly. "I don't need protection, Dad. I need a life." The words hung in the air between them, sharp and painful. Richard didn't reply. He stood up, his expression unreadable, and left the dining room. Sophia sat there for a long time, staring at her half-eaten meal. Her chest felt heavy, but beneath that weight was something stronger, a determination that had been missing for too long. That night, she texted Daniel. "My father found out about us. He's not happy." "I figured that might happen," he replied. "Do you want me to stay away?" Sophia hesitated before typing, "No, you're the only thing keeping me from going back to who I was before. I can't lose that." There was a pause, then Daniel's message appeared. "Then we'll just be careful. I'm not going anywhere." The next few days passed quietly. Sophia tried to keep peace at home, but her father had grown distant again. He avoided the topic, but she could feel his disapproval in the way he looked at her. One weekend, Daniel invited her to join him and Ethan for a small picnic by the lake. She almost declined, worried about her father finding out, but in the end she couldn't resist. When they arrived, the air was cool, the water calm. Ethan threw pebbles into the lake while Daniel spread out a blanket. They talked, laughed, and shared stories. Sophia watched Daniel teaching Ethan how to skip stones, his patience and warmth shining through every word. It was such a simple thing, yet so full of love. "You're a good father," she said softly when he came back to sit beside her. He smiled. "I try my best." "He deserves that." She looked at him for a long moment. "He's lucky to have you." Daniel looked at her then, really looked. "Maybe we're both lucky," he said quietly. She felt her heart skip a beat. Before she could reply, Ethan called out, "Dad, Miss Sophia, look at this." He had managed to make a stone bounce twice across the water. They both clapped and laughed, breaking the tension. As the sun dipped lower, Daniel helped pack up. Before they left, he looked at her seriously.
"Sophia, I don't want to cause trouble for you."
"If being around me makes things harder, I'll understand." She shook her head. "Don't say that. Being around you makes things better. For the first time, I feel seen. Like I matter for who I am, not who people think I should be." Daniel's eyes softened. "You've always mattered, Sophia. You just forgot for a while." She smiled, her eyes glistening. "Maybe, but you helped me remember." That evening, when she got home, her father was waiting. His tone was cold. "Where were you?" "I went out with friends," she said quietly. "With that man again," he said. It wasn't a question. "Yes," she replied. "And his son." Richard's face hardened. "Sophia, this has to stop. I won't let you embarrass yourself, or this family." Her voice trembled, but her words were steady. "Embarrass? You think kindness is embarrassing? You think being treated like a human being is something to be ashamed of?" "Enough," he said sharply. "I'm your father. You'll listen to me." Sophia took a deep breath. "You may be my father, but you don't get to decide who makes me happy." His jaw tightened. For a long moment he said nothing. Then he turned and walked away, leaving her standing alone in the quiet hallway. She cried that night, not because of the argument, but because she realized how far apart they had grown. The man who once held her hand through nightmares now couldn't even see her heart. Days turned into weeks, and the distance between them only grew. But Sophia refused to stop seeing Daniel and Ethan. She found comfort in their company, warmth in their laughter, and strength in their friendship. Sometimes she visited the garage while Daniel worked. She'd sit nearby, reading or painting while he fixed cars. They didn't always talk much, but their silence was peaceful. Ethan would run around, handing tools to his father and occasionally sneaking cookies from Sophia's bag. One afternoon, as she watched them working side by side, Sophia realized something. This simple, messy, ordinary life was what she wanted. Not the grand parties, not the cold halls of her father's mansion, but moments like these. Still, she knew things couldn't stay hidden forever. A week later, one of her father's business associates saw her at the garage and mentioned it to him during a meeting. By the time she got home that evening, Richard was waiting in the living room, his expression stormy. "I heard where you've been spending your time," he said bitterly. "Do you have any idea how this looks?" Sophia's heart pounded. "I don't care how it looks, Dad. I care how it feels." "And how does it feel?" he demanded. "Alive," she said simply. "It feels alive," Richard's voice rose. "He's using you, Sophia. Can't you see that? A man like that will take advantage of your kindness, of your situation." "Stop," she shouted, cutting him off. "You don't know him. You don't know anything about him." Her father froze, shocked. Sophia rarely raised her voice. Tears filled her eyes. "He's the first person in years who's looked at me and seen more than a wheelchair. He treats me like a person. Isn't that what you wanted for me?" Richard's face softened for a moment. guilt flickering in his eyes. But pride was stronger. You don't understand, Sophia. The world isn't kind. People will talk. They'll make you suffer for it. I already suffer, she said quietly. Every day. But not when I'm with him. Her voice trembled, but her words were steady. If you can't accept that, then maybe you don't really know your own daughter anymore. She left before he could respond, rolling out to the garden, her tears falling silently. She looked up at the sky, breathing deeply, trying to calm her racing heart. She didn't know what would happen next. She didn't know if her father would ever understand. But deep down, she knew one thing for sure. She wasn't going to give up this new life, this fragile happiness she'd found. Because for the first time in years, she had something worth fighting for. And she wasn't going to let anyone, not even her father, take that away. Days passed slowly after the argument with her father. Sophia kept herself busy, spending time at the lake, painting and talking to Daniel and Ethan whenever she could. But something inside her still ached. She missed her father. Despite their differences, she wanted him to understand her, not as the daughter he wanted to protect, but as the woman she was becoming. Daniel noticed her quietness one evening when they met for a walk by the park. The air was cool and the sky was turning orange with the setting sun. "You've been thinking a lot lately," he said gently. She gave a small smile. "You can tell?" "I can always tell," he said. "Is it about your father?" She nodded. "He's angry." "I don't blame him for being protective, but I wish he'd just see what I see. You, Ethan, the world outside those big gates, it's real. It's full of love, not judgment. I wish he could feel that." Daniel kicked a pebble along the path. "He's scared," he said quietly. "When people have lived their whole lives trying to control everything, they panic when they can't. Maybe one day he'll realize control isn't love." Sophia looked up at him, her eyes soft. "You always know how to say the gut thing," he smiled. "I just say what I mean." They walked in silence for a while. Children played nearby, their laughter echoing across the park. Ethan ran ahead chasing a butterfly, and Sophia couldn't help but smile at his joy. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked suddenly. "Regret what?" "Losing so much, being a single parent, struggling alone." Daniel took a moment to answer. "Sometimes I get tired, sure. But regret?" He shook his head. "No. Because every time I look at Ethan, I see how far we've come. And now?" He glanced at her, his expression warm. "Now I see more reasons to be thankful." Sophia's heart filled with a quiet happiness. She had never known such gentle strength before. As they left the park, Daniel turned to her. "There's something I wanted to ask you," he said, a little nervous. "What is it?" He smiled shyly. "There's a big company charity event next week, right? The one your father's hosting again?" "Yes," she said slowly. "Why?" He rubbed the back of his neck. "Well, I thought maybe I could come with you." "As your date," she blinked in surprise. "You want to go with me? You know my father will be there, right?" "I do," he said, his eyes steady. "But I also know you deserve to walk into that room with someone who's proud to be by your side." Her breath caught. For a moment she couldn't speak. Then she smiled softly. "You really don't care what people will say, do you?" "Not about the wrong things," he replied. "People talk no matter what you do. Might as well give them something good to talk about." She laughed quietly. "You're impossible." "I prefer the word persistent," he said with a wink. That night Sophia lay in bed thinking about what he'd said. For years she had avoided public attention, afraid of being pitied or judged. But now she realized she was done hiding. If people wanted to talk, let them. She finally had something real in her life. Love, friendship, laughter. Why should she be ashamed of that? The day of the event arrived. The grand ballroom was filled with chandeliers, golden lights, and the soft hum of music. Guests mingled, dressed in their finest clothes. Cameras flashed at the entrance as people arrived in sleek cars. Sophia sat quietly in her wheelchair near the edge of the room, her hands resting in her lap. Her father was busy greeting donors and shaking hands, though his eyes kept flicking toward her, full of concern and pride mixed together. Mrs. Bennet leaned close and whispered, "You look beautiful tonight," Sophia smiled. "Thank you." Her dress was simple but elegant, navy blue with silver details that caught the light when she moved. Her hair was tied loosely, a few strands framing her face. The noise in the room softened when the doors opened again. Daniel walked in wearing a dark suit and a nervous smile. Ethan wasn't with him tonight, it was just Daniel standing tall and sure, yet clearly out of place among the wealthy crowd. Sophia's heart leapt when she saw him. He made his way through the room, ignoring the curious glances and whispered comments. When he reached her, he gave a small bow and said quietly, "Can I be your date?" For a moment, she just looked at him, her eyes glistening. Then she smiled. "You already are." He offered his arm, and she placed her hand gently on it. Together, they moved toward the center of the room. People stared, surprised, uncertain, but Sophia held her head high. Her father noticed immediately. His expression hardened as he saw Daniel, but before he could approach, the event host took the stage and began speaking. "Tonight," the host said, "we gather not just to raise funds, but to celebrate the spirit of community and compassion." As the speech continued, Sophia felt Daniel's hand resting lightly on hers. It was a simple gesture, but it gave her strength. After the speech, her father came over. His smile was polite but tight. "Daniel," he said, his tone formal, "I wasn't expecting to see you here." "I was invited," Daniel replied calmly, "by your daughter." Richard's eyes flicked toward Sophia. "Sophia, may I have a word?" Daniel started to move away, but Sophia stopped him. "No, Dad," she said softly. "Whatever you have to say, you can say it here." Richard's jaw tightened. "Sophia, this isn't the time or place for—" "Yes, it is," she interrupted gently. "Because this is exactly what this event is supposed to stand for. Kindness, understanding, unity. And yet here we are, pretending those things only matter when it looks good in photos." The room had grown quiet around them. People were watching, listening. She took a deep breath and continued, "Dad, I love you, but I'm not a child anymore. I don't need protection from the world. I need a place in it. And Daniel, he gives me that." Richard's face softened slightly, but he still looked conflicted. "Sophia, I just don't want you to get hurt." "I already was hurt," she said quietly. "Not by him. By losing myself after the accident. But he helped me find my strength again. Isn't that what every parent wants for their child?" For a long moment, Richard said nothing. His eyes moved from her to Daniel, who stood silently beside her, steady and respectful. Then Richard exhaled, the tension in his shoulders easing. "I may not understand your world," he said finally, "but I can see he makes you happy." Sophia's eyes filled with tears. "He does." Richard nodded slowly, his expression softening. "Then that's what matters." He extended his hand to Daniel. "Welcome to the family, son." Daniel hesitated for a second, then shook his hand firmly. "Thank you, sir." Applause broke out around the room. It wasn't planned, but people felt the sincerity of the moment. For the first time, Sophia didn't feel like the girl everyone pitied. She felt strong, loved, seen. As the evening went on, she and Daniel danced, or rather, he moved with her wheelchair in gentle circles while the music played softly. Laughter filled the air, and she felt lighter than she had in years. At one point, Daniel leaned close and whispered, "Told you I'd be your date." She laughed through her tears. "You kept your promise." When the night ended, they stepped outside together. The cool air carried the faint sound of music from inside. Stars glittered above, and for a while they just stood there holding hands. Sophia looked up at him and said quietly, "You know what's funny? For so long I thought happiness meant walking again, being like everyone else. But now I realize it's about being loved for who I already am." Daniel smiled. "You were never broken, Sophia. You just needed someone to remind you how whole you've always been." She felt her heart swell with emotion. "You did that for me," he shook his head. "No, you did that for yourself. I just got lucky enough to watch." They stood in silence for a while, the kind of silence that didn't need words. Behind them, the lights from the ballroom glowed like fireflies, and in front of them, the world stretched open and bright. Sophia glanced back once more and saw her father at the doorway watching them. He gave a small nod, a gesture of acceptance, and turned back inside. She smiled. For the first time in a long time, she felt peace. Later that night, Daniel drove her home. They didn't talk much, but the silence was full of warmth. When they reached her house, he walked her to the door. "Thank you," she said softly. "For what?" "For showing me that love doesn't need to be perfect to be real." He smiled, brushing a loose strand of hair from her face. "Love just needs to be honest. That's all." As he turned to leave, she called out, "Daniel?" He looked back. "Next time," she said with a grin. "Maybe I'll be the one asking you to be my date." He laughed softly. "I'll hold you to that." When he drove away, Sophia sat by her window watching the stars. She thought about the girl she used to be, the one who hid behind fear and silence, and the woman she had become. She knew life wouldn't always be easy. There would still be challenges, doubts, and moments of sadness. But she also knew that she had the courage to face them, because love had given her strength. And somewhere out there, a single father and his little boy had reminded her that even when the world turns away, there's always someone willing to stay. That night, before she fell asleep, she whispered to herself, "I'm not invisible anymore.